Welcome to our tutorial on creating a 3D rendering in Photoshop. What you see here is a 3D menu, and this is the text that we animated in 3D. So each letter is its own piece with its own 3D fields, and it started as a basic text file. So that's the final product that you're going to have. We added reflection at the bottom, we had lighting to bring it down, and it takes about 30 minutes to create this file type. So I'm going to close this just so my computer isn't running on too much memory. So we're going to make a new document, file new, and we want to make it the same size as a higher resolution an HD screen. So 1920 by 1080 pixels and RGB color, and I'm just going to put it on transparent background. Okay. And then I've taken to my background just so there's contrast for what we're going to do. I'm going to make a solid shape that's black to put on the background. So I'm going to just make a giant rectangle for my background. Okay. And now I'll make a new layer. And that one we said love, we can change it up and do happy. It really doesn't matter what you want. If you're going to do happy, make maybe the A a triangle, love, put the O as a circle, just so you get familiar with creating both shapes and text. Alright, and so I'm going to make my font white so it's a nice contrast. And I'm going to do HPPY. And no A because I'm going to make that triangle, and I'm going to make that triangle at the end. Make it a font that's bold and easy to use. The thicker the font, the more space you'll have when you actually develop that 3D shape. So when you're going through your fonts, think about how you'd actually translate to a three-dimensional space, because that's going to make a big difference in your actual final design. If it's very thin, your 3D element will be very thin. So when you go through it all, you want to find something that has some mass to it, okay? But again, it's up to you. It's your design. So that kind of has a mass to it, and I'm happy with that font size. And if I want to make it bigger, this would be the time I would make it bigger though. So if you want it a larger font, you're more than welcome to find a font that suits your design. I'm going to do it at 100. Yeah, my PPY visible, okay? And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to create a custom shape. So if you view your menu, underneath your rectangle shapes, there's one called Custom Shapes. And if you go along the top, you have that you're on Custom Shapes. You have your fill color, which I'd like mine to be white, and that I would like to have a certain straight line outline. We can change that at the end if I don't like it. But here's my drop down of shapes. So if you want a heart, there's your heart. If you're looking for more, that little spiral always means there's more, so I can load all my gallery if I so wish. And then I can use any icon. I want you to be familiar with how to add it as both a text and an icon. So if you just add something that we can use, then you'll be able to further animate. So I'm going to create a triangle. And so click and drag. There's my triangle. So I'm going to spell happy this way. The order does not matter. Obviously, that is not happy spelled correctly. I know that. But we're going to change that at the end. And you'll see why. So the next thing we're going to do is select our text layer and go to Type, Extrude to 3D. Dun, dun, dun. And now we're taken into a 3D setting. So it's important to note that you've added a new layer menu to your side here. So you now have the 3D panel. And if we note, we also have more menus if we go into them. So this is our current view that we're looking at. If we want to change the direction of our font, we're going to go into our Properties tab. So if you go Window, Properties, you'll be able to further edit it. So my 3D camera is kind of hiding it. Here you can see the shape and the direction, and this is where you can further edit it. So if I change my slider, you'll see that it moves in the Z-axis as to where it's located at. Okay. The depth of fields also will further adjust, literally, the depth of field. So the kind of crispness and clarity of 3D. A couple other things to note is that you can now navigate your lighting and your angle. So if you select it, you can rotate your field as to which way we're looking at our happy. So that's the 3D Move tool. Okay? If you don't see it there, it's also sometimes hidden at the top. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the 3D Mesh to actually further animate. So show all 3D meshes, you'll see your mesh. What you're going to do in your 3D mesh is ensure that Cast Shadows is selected, and you're going to change your extrusion depth. Right now it will change the length of the extrusion. So you want to make it somewhat realistic, not make it kind of like a Star Wars navigation. So you kind of want to be looking for a simple depth to it. And at any point you can rotate and angle your directions. Your arrows represent your X, Y, and Z axis, so you can choose to navigate along the X, Y, and Z, or if you click around it, you will be able to rotate the angle. What we're going to do is, once we've clicked our mesh menu again, we are going to select the cap icon, which looks like this right here, cap. And we're going to change this, instead of being just front, we're going to change it to front and back. And that kind of will allow us to add edging. So right now you can change the edging so it kind of cuts off in a more easier manner versus being such a strange edge. So I'm going to go with my little half mountain quarter circle there. And I'm going to change the width to add a little bit of depth. So as you see, as you navigate this, it kind of creates a rounding. Want to see what's happening? It's rounding my letters a little bit. None, starting to round my letters and actually create kind of like a bevel on my work. Then what you're going to do is move on to adding our texture to it. As you saw, mine was a wood grain. So you're going to select your 3D panel. So we're going back to our mesh layer, and we are going to change the front inflation preset. So in the drop down you can see where it's going to actually apply if you'd like to change it there. But what we're going to do is open up our sample menu. Where are you hiding? Oh, there we go. Okay, so you're going to go back to your 3D menu, select the happy, which is your word, and then the front inflation. We're going to change sides of each part. So right now we're going to work on the front inflation. And if you click on the diffuse folder, load our texture, and you can choose to use any texture, it's up to you. I saved a wood grain texture, so I'm going to use that, but you can choose any image and it will apply to the center. As you can see, it only goes on one part of this folder. So this is only going on the front, okay? To do the other sides, you actually change the other parts of the menu. So you'd select each part that you want it to go. This is tedious if you want the same texture, but if you wanted to do it on multiple, then you would be able to apply different ones to each part of the component. So here you have the option to change the shine and reflection of each one, the roughness of how it's applied. Again, that's personal to what you're trying to do. If you click the little drop down too, there's always more options available for you of default textures available. So it's up to you which one you'd like to select. And there's always more available within it. Now we're going to apply it to the other side. So it is a little bit of repeat. So if I want to use it to other sides of my dimension, again, I would go the same place, load texture, and locate my new file, and open, and now we'll load it to that side. And here you can see it starts taking on a whole life. By any means, you are more than welcome to edit within any of these properties. You're not limited by what you see. So if at any point you want to change any of it, you just select the side that you want, and then you can change the opacity, the reflection, all of the options within, and you can change the illumination if you want to have other filters through it. And it kind of makes it personal to your design. So for the next one, I'm going to show you another way to add it. So if you don't want to load it from your gallery, you can choose to just click on the side, and then there's meshes available for you. If you have a specific one, you can locate a material and save it, or you can load existing materials from elsewhere to put it in your default so that you don't have to do it each time. But if you just want to use the default's available for you, and then it will apply to that. And if you choose that this is the wood grain you're looking for and not the one on the front, you can always go back. It's never limited once you've applied something, so if you decide, you know, that's the one I want, you can place that one onto it. And again, you can have different parts of different colors because each one is separate. So there's our happy. If you're planning on seeing the back, by all means change the back. If we're not going to see the back, no one ever needs to know what's going on in the back. That is completely up to you as the designer, which part you'd like to edit. And so we're going to save our work just because 3D requires a little more energy, so we don't want to crash our computer. So always make sure you save it in case you lose any of your steps. And so what we're going to do now is go back to our layers, and we want to go to 3D and split extrusion. And what it's going to do is it's going to make each of these letters separate. Now before HPPY was all connected, so it would be impossible to put the triangle in just that place. But now if you check your 3D panel, you should have each one of these separated. So I can select just my H, or I can select just my P, or just my Y. So each one of these is separate. So if I want to have this one, and this one, and this one move over, I can select each one and animate accordingly. So I know I'm going to have to put the A in the middle. I might as well move my letters down the axis. So I select the layer, and then I'm given the arrows on it, and I can rotate each one individually. If they want to sit differently, I can stack them differently. It's actually a really interesting way to edit your design, because before you're not really given that 3D of each element. So So how I did that was I split the extrusions to make them all separate. So now I know I want my triangle to fit, plop right in there. Perfect. So what we have to do is we have to make our triangle 3D. So we're going to select our layers and we're going to select the triangle. All right. Okay. All right, sorry about that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your shape layer, you're going to right-click it and rasterize the layer. And so it's going to convert it to no longer be limited as a shape. So my little icon shape is gone. Now you know 3D, new 3D layer from File. So now we have our heart, I like new 3D from selected layer. Let's try it again. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to right click our layer and we're going to rasterize it. It's going to get rid of that shape element so that when we go to new selected layer 3D extrusion, it becomes a 3D again. But just like your letters, you now have your shape menu, so you can change again the capping of any of it if you'd like to add the edging. And again, your width will actually apply it when you start changing the width. Okay. To change the actual mesh, you're more than welcome to do that. What I find easiest is to select the actual sidings and then again apply what you're looking to apply. So I'm going for the red. You could go for the red. If you're looking to really create depth, find something with a little more checkered so you can see the actual depth of it. What we're going to do now is actually apply color though, so you can see how colors can actually be animated. So I'm going to have none of this, back to my basic, and I'm going to apply a color. Just like the heart, in case some of you have the heart, we'll do a red color. So find a red color. And then for your specular color, you're going to start adding kind of the contrast and shading to it. So when you start doing a darker red, you'll start blending that in. Now you want your red shine. Where color is it going to shine? And then what is your undertone? What's really great about all the colors you add is that you can change the opacity of any of these as well. So if you want it to be more 3D, see what happens now? I had this really cool color and I've thought of all the elements of it, but now it can be three-dimensional. And actually be see-through is the word I'm looking for. And so you would do that for each one. So you choose the colors you want to apply. So you can go for your families of red. And then you can apply your opacity. And then again, you would do your sides, change your color. Okay. And we can change our opacity if we want the whole thing to be somewhat see-through. And then our back obviously needs to be changed because we're doing everything else see-through. If the back isn't changed, it will start having an odd effect on the whole design. So, reds. This is where all these specular illumination, they really start to play effects because then the edging that's not changed will kind of be very visible. So I'm just kind of going within the red family, just so it becomes a cohesive red triangle the whole way down. And again, if you wanted different colors for each side, this is where you would do it, but I want mine to be like a solid red glass. Almost done. Okay. Then again, if I select my shape, I'm able to navigate it. So obviously I need to move across the axis, I need to move down, and I needed to rotate. To kind of start fitting into this kind of world. Sorry. Okay, so we've created our red shape. And we have our text layers. So what we're going to do next is start kind of stylizing the whole scene and kind of combining the scenes. So we have our 2 layers of our pieces, and what we want to kind of do is apply it to the same layer. So what we're going to do is in our 3D panel, we're going to select our current view, and we don't want it to be custom, we want it to be our happy. So we're in the view of the happy. But don't worry, we are going to blend them together. So when I select now my 2 layers, I will then be able to go to 3D, merge 3D layers, merge 3D layers. There we go. And so each one is now kind of in the same camera view. But again, in 3D, if I go into my actual pieces, I can animate each one separately. So if I select that, I will just get the movement for this, but it now provides the camera view the same view. And my rotation, there we go. So now it's starting to come together to be the same layer, the same piece, and we can render our lighting into each of this. Okay. And again, this is where you're animating the stacking of everything. So if you want each one to kind of play different pieces and kind of take on different roles, for example, maybe this one is leaning onto this wall. You can have it leaning in. The Y is supporting it from the side because it's been fully knocked over. This is where you're going to start stylizing your full-on design. So don't be limited at this point. Actually kind of start being artistic and going with trials, because you never know what's going to work until you actually kind of start trying it, especially with the 3D, because there's so many opportunities available for which direction you can animate each piece. So it's kind of just a trial and error. If you don't like it, you undo. If you like it, you move on. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at now. There's my happy to start. So I have my wood grain apply, the 3-dimension, I have my glassness of that. So what we're going to kind of work on now is our camera and what we're seeing. So I'm going back to my 3D. Of my happy, thank you. And I'm going to go to current view. And now I'm on my custom view 2, which is fine. And when you notice that you actually have the word camera, you're able to move the camera manually. Or you can click on the coordinates as to how far we are. So this kind of is going to give you the coordinates from how far the camera is. Your lighting source is up top. Your camera movement is over here if you need to move your whole scene. So notice how I'm not moving the layer, but I'm moving like the camera around now. So think of this as when you're on your current view, you have your camera selected. Let me plug in my computer. My apologies. So you can now navigate what we're actually looking at to be content, because that's what's going to render out at the end. So this is where you're kind of working at what we're looking at within it. If you like what we're looking at, you can kind of save it as a new view. So if this is the view I want to default back, I can say home. Home's always a good one for a starting point. And then if you really want to start rotating more and kind of getting more intricate into it, you're more than welcome to. Don't feel limited. So if you want to kind of go bonkers with it, by all means. And then you can have it as a new view. And if you don't like this, you haven't lost it because you have home. And you just go back to home. Okay, so don't feel afraid. Once you found a good one, save it and then keep trying because you can always go back to the last one you saved. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add kind of that plane that it's going to reflect on at the bottom. So in our sense, it's going to be called the ground. So we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to make it ground. So we're going to literally make a new layer. It's going to be our ground, and I really just need a white box. So grab your shape, your rectangle. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, Command minus, make a white box. There you go. There's my ground. Clearly, this is not going to work for my ground view, but if I go to 3D, new mesh from layered, and I go postcard, it's going to turn into a postcard. Clearly, we want the postcard to not look this way. So if we go into our current view, and we start editing our plane, we can start seeing more what's going on. Okay. We're going to change the X and Y row creation. So our ground mesh is selected, and under our panel here, the coordinates, now we can actually start rotating it. So I know I want it to be kind of knocked 50% over, and so that will allow me to rotate the angle to go on the ground, so it's underneath it. But now I want it to be combined again to the same coordinates so that the light applies to both of those. So I select them both, my ground and my happy, and I go to 3D, merge 3D layers. And we keep combining when we work on stuff so that it becomes the same lighting space. Okay? But again, if you go into your 3D channels, my ground layer is right there, and this is where I'm given the tools to rotate it and actually further adjust it to put it where I would like it to be. Sorry. So just click happy. Ground. There we go. See how my ground gets closer? I lose my shadows, but as I'm behind it, I get my shadows because my light source is up there. So that's kind of how that goes above. I need to rotate this though, if it will let me. That's not the rotate I want. I'm just going to select my whole current view and rotate my whole current Command Z, because I would like to see me on top view, which apparently does not like me right now. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, happiness. That took more steps than I would have liked. Okay, and I'm going to go back. Luckily, we set the home view because the camera went all wonky there. So now I'm going to go back to my home view. Command plus. Okay, so now I'm starting to have a ground layer that is a little bit more usable. So you can see we have more shadows. I'm going to make it bigger and closer. Anytime you click into it. Okay, there's my happy. Good. So we're going to select our round mesh. Selected, and so see how it's selected, you can see the whole box of it. And I'm going to go to 3D, snap object to ground plane. It's now rounded. And it's now 100% below. Okay. And now you'll start seeing, because you have a ground, that maybe some letters aren't really realistic where they are, and you'll start playing around with the location of each letter. So, what we're going to do right now is actually start applying a texture to our ground so that when we have a reflection, it's visible. So if I go into my ground mesh and select the word ground, this is where I'm able to start kind of fusing it. And what I'd like you to do is select your options. So for our diffuse color, if you want to just type in D4CBB, okay? For our ambient color, if you want to type in 363636, okay? And we're going to make it shiny. So for our shine value, so they need 20%, bump that up to 50. And for our reflection, this is where we'll start reflecting in the ground. I'm going to bump that up to 15. And the refraction to 1.850. And if you can't really see what's happening, if you hit layers and then just select your layers, kind of will be taken out of it. So you can start seeing that you're getting this ground, okay? And to go back into your 3D, just go back to your, select your layer, 3D, and then you're back into your ground. So now we have the ground, but we're actually going to start changing the light sensitivity. So as you can see, I have my infinite light 1 layer. And we're going to change the intensity of our lighting to be 90% if it's not already. And the shadow, we're going to add a shadow because we do want that on the ground. So I'm going to make it 30. So we do have more of a shadow coming down onto the ground. Then what you're going to do is add a new light to the scene. So if you go to your little light bulb, you'll be able okay, you're going to add a new light to this now. So you go to the new layer and instead you're going to choose a new point light. And so I'm given an extra light to my scene once it's loaded. So there's my infinite light, now I have a point light. It's kind of like a spotlight when you think of your lightings. And so my light's currently in the center. I bring it up, my light shines above. There's my light bulb there, okay? So bring it above your work, not so it's right in the center. And then when you actually select the word point light, you're going to do some animations here. You're going to make sure it says custom, point, white 100, with shadow, 0, okay? We're not going to start there. We're going to add a new point light. And yes, I realize it's going to start getting very bright. And again, with this point light, you're going to bring it just up a little bit again, but not as high directly. Okay. Same deal, select your point light. Make sure it's custom, point, 0, 100, shadow, 0. We're going to go back to point light 1, and we're going to change the color to C78, C04, and we're going to change the intensity of our color to 30%. We don't want it too much of a yellow, but we want it to be warmer than white light. So that's what that does. So then we're going to go to point light 2. I'm going to change our intensity of point light 2 to 20%. And now we start getting a much warmer kind of picture. Then we're going to set our environment light. So if you go to the word environment, and now in the environment, we're going to change the color here to 191919 and make the intensity of that color 50%. And again, you're kind of getting dim mood lighting with what you're doing here. So now that we've modified the lights, you're more than welcome to move any light at any point just by grabbing the light, and then you're given a direction. And if you want to try and see where each one plays a better setting on your thing, you just select your light, and now I can kind of rotate where my light's coming from. See what happens? And so you can do that with any of your lights to kind of get a better idea of what kind of your lighting you're looking for. Okay, so you don't feel limited by your lighting. By all means, please edit. But when you move it, note your shadows are going to change. So just figure out what works best for your shadowing. Okay. If you want to rotate the whole scene to see how everything's lit, again, just go back to the main scene, and now you'll have your modes here, and you can rotate the whole scene to see how the whole thing is looking. Okay, so you're not limited. And again, to zoom out of your picture or Command minus, kind of get a better vibe of how everything's looking. If you're not sure, I always like to kind of click back here because you're able to see better, I find, without all the meshes popping around. And then to go back to your meshes, just select the 3D layer and back to your 3D options. All right. We are almost done. What you're going to do is go to 3D, render.